writer's strike, recycled scripts from a decade-old show, and two TV stars who'd already worked together. Sounds like a recipe for disaster, right? The New Odd Couple's bizarre behind-the-scenes story includes only 3 original episodes, a future Family Matters reunion, and a Broadway debut happening the same week. From Al Molinaro's Happy Days conflict to a theme song that became more uptempo, these forgotten tales reveal why this African-American reboot never found its audience despite featuring 2 beloved sitcom legends. Fact 1. Born from a writer's strike crisis. When The New Odd Couple premiered in October of 1982, it arrived during one of the most challenging periods in television history. A Hollywood writer's strike had begun in 1981 and continued into the following year, leaving networks scrambling to fill their primetime schedules with new content. The strike paralyzed the entire television industry, forcing producers to get creative with how they launched new series. For ABC and the team behind The New Odd Couple, this meant making a controversial decision that would ultimately shape the show's entire trajectory. Rather than waiting for original scripts to be written, producers decided to dust off old episodes from the original Odd Couple series that had ended 7 years earlier in 1975. They recycled 8 complete scripts from the Tony Randall and Jack Klugman version, updating only minor details to fit the new cast and the early 1980s setting. This meant that nearly half of the show's entire run consisted of material that audiences had already seen before, just performed by different actors. The recycled episodes weren't just similar in plot, they often kept the same dialogue and story beats, making them essentially word-for-word remakes. While this strategy allowed the show to get on the air quickly and cheaply during the strike, it also meant The New Odd Couple was stuck in the shadow of its predecessor from the very beginning. Viewers watching in 1982 were essentially seeing reruns disguised as new episodes, and many could immediately recognize the recycled storylines since the original series was still airing in syndication. This creative shortcut, born out of necessity during the writer's strike, gave the show an unusual identity crisis that it would never fully escape. Fact 2. Only 3 original scripts ever made. The writer's strike eventually came to an end, and the union writers returned to work, ready to create fresh material for The New Odd Couple. However, by the time original scripts could finally be produced, the damage had already been done. The show had premiered with those 8 recycled episodes, and audiences had largely tuned out, unable to connect with what felt like a carbon copy of a series that was still widely available in reruns. When new writers finally sat down to craft original stories specifically for Ron Glass and DeMond, Wilson's version of Felix and Oscar, they only managed to produce 3 brand new episodes before ABC made the decision to cancel the series. These 3 original scripts represented what The New Odd Couple could have been if it had launched under different circumstances. Stories that were tailored to the unique chemistry and talents of its lead actors rather than simply rehashing old material. The tragedy of this situation is that viewers and critics never really got to see what the show might have become with a full season of original content. Those 3 episodes demonstrated that the series had potential beyond just being a remake, but it was simply too little, too late to save it from cancellation. The show had already developed a reputation as nothing more than a reheated version of the original, and changing course mid-season couldn't repair that perception. ABC executives, seeing the poor ratings and realizing that even new material couldn't turn things around, decided to pull the plug after just 18 total episodes. The New Odd Couple became a cautionary tale about the risks of relying too heavily on past success, rather than creating something genuinely fresh from the start. Fact 3. The pilot was word-for-word identical. The very first episode of The New Odd Couple, which aired on October 29, 1982, was titled The Ides of April, and it presented viewers with an immediate sense of déjà vu. The pilot episode was essentially a scene-by-scene, line-by-line remake of an original Odd Couple episode where Felix accidentally gets Oscar audited by the IRS. The basic plot remained completely unchanged. Felix goes to the IRS office for what he thinks is a minor issue with his own taxes. But during the conversation, he inadvertently mentions details about Oscar's financial situation that raise red flags with the tax agents. This leads to Oscar facing a full audit, creating the central conflict of the episode. The dialogue throughout the episode was lifted almost verbatim from the original script, with only the most minimal updates made to acknowledge that the show was now set in the 1980s rather than the 1970s. One of the few notable changes was updating a reference to opera tickets to instead mention tickets to Annie, the hit Broadway musical that was enormously popular in the early 80s. These tiny modifications only highlighted how little effort went into adapting the material for a new era and a new cast. For viewers who remembered the original series, watching this pilot felt less like experiencing a fresh take on beloved characters and more like watching a staged recreation. The word-for-word repetition made it impossible for Ron Glass and Demond Wilson to truly make the roles their own, as they were essentially being asked to deliver Tony Randall and Jack Klugman's exact performances. Critics and audiences noticed this immediately, with many reviews pointing out how the pilot failed to establish any unique identity for the new series. Fact 4. Stars had already worked together. A decade earlier, Ron Glass and Demond Wilson weren't strangers when they were cast as Felix and Oscar in The New Odd Couple. In fact, the two actors had a professional history that dated back nearly a full decade before this 1982 sitcom brought them together as roommates. During the early 1970s, both men had appeared together in 2 episodes of the hit NBC comedy Sanford and Son, which starred Red Fox and Demond Wilson in the lead roles. Wilson, of course, played Lamont Sanford throughout the series' entire run from 1972 to 1977, making him one of television's most recognizable faces by that point. Ron Glass, who was just beginning to build his career at the time, guest starred in 2 Sanford and Son episodes during the show's 2nd and 4th seasons. The first episode was titled Card Sharps, which aired during Season 2, and the second was Once a Thief from Season 4. In both appearances, Glass played supporting characters who interacted with Wilson's Lamont, giving the two actors a chance to work together and develop a professional rapport. This prior collaboration meant that when they reunited for The New Odd Couple, they already had some established chemistry and familiarity with each other's acting styles. However, their earlier work together had been in relatively small doses, just 2 episodes spread across several years, rather than the intense, everyday partnership required for a sitcom where they would be co-leads appearing in every single scene. Still, having that shared history likely made the transition into playing roommates slightly smoother, even if the show itself struggled to find its footing with audiences. Fact 5. Second Neil Simon remake attempt, The New Odd Couple, represented a significant milestone in television history, though not necessarily for the reasons its creators had hoped. This 1982 series was actually the second time that producers had attempted to remake one of Neil Simon's classic stage plays with a predominantly African-American cast for network television. The first such attempt had occurred more than a decade earlier with a sitcom called Barefoot in the Park, which premiered in 1970 on ABC. Based on Simon's 1963 Broadway play of the same name, Barefoot in the Park starred Scoey Mitchell and Tracy Reed as newlyweds Paul and Corey Bratter trying to make their marriage work while living in a cramped Manhattan apartment. That earlier series featured an almost entirely black cast, with only one white actor in a major supporting role, making it groundbreaking for its time as one of the first sitcoms since Amos and Andy to center on African-American characters. Unfortunately, Barefoot in the Park faced significant challenges during its brief run, including behind-the-scenes conflicts that led to star Scoey Mitchell being fired after just 12 episodes were produced. The show was quickly canceled in December of 1970 after failing to attract strong ratings. When producers decided to try again with The New Odd Couple 12 years later, they were essentially attempting to prove that a predominantly black remake of a Neil Simon property could succeed where Barefoot in the Park had failed. Both shows shared the same basic strategy: take a beloved Neil Simon comedy that had already been successful with white actors and recast it with black performers. Both also struggled to find audiences, suggesting that simply swapping the race of the characters without substantially rethinking the material might not have been the most effective approach. Fact 6. Barefoot premiered the same night as original Odd Couple. One of the most remarkable coincidences in television history occurred on September 24, 1970, when ABC launched not one but two Neil Simon adaptations on the same evening. Barefoot in the Park, the predominantly African-American remake of Simon's romantic comedy, premiered at 9 o'clock that Thursday night, serving as the lead-in program for another brand-new series called The Odd Couple. That's right, the original Odd Couple, starring Tony Randall and Jack Klugman, made its debut immediately following Barefoot in the Park, creating a rare 2-hour block of back-to-back Neil Simon comedies. Both shows were based on Simon's Broadway hits that had already been adapted into successful films, and both were being developed by producer Gary Marshall, who had a strong track record with sitcoms. ABC executives hoped that by positioning both shows together on Thursday nights, they could create a powerful comedy lineup that would dominate the ratings. The network strategically scheduled them right after Bewitched, which aired at 8:30 and was still a popular draw despite being in its 7th season. The idea was that viewers would stick around after Bewitched ended to watch both new Simon adaptations, giving each show the best possible chance at success. However, Bewitched itself was experiencing declining ratings by 1970, which meant that neither Barefoot in the Park nor The Odd Couple received the strong lead-in support that ABC had anticipated. While The Odd Couple managed to survive and eventually thrive over its 5-season run, Barefoot in the Park lasted only a few months before being canceled in December of that same year. The fact that both shows premiered together on the exact same night remains a fascinating piece of television trivia. Fact 7. Female version opened on Broadway. Same year, 1982, turned out to be a remarkably busy year for the Odd Couple franchise, with two completely different versions of the property launching simultaneously in different mediums. While the new Odd Couple premiered on ABC television in October of 1982 with its African-American cast, Broadway audiences were also being treated to a radically reimagined version of the story. Neil Simon himself had written a new adaptation called The Female Odd Couple, which opened on Broadway in June of 1985, though development and pre-Broadway tours had begun in 1982. This version featured gender-swapped versions of the main characters, with the neat freak character now called Florence instead of Felix, and the sloppy character renamed Olive instead of Oscar. The Broadway production initially starred Sally Struthers, famous for playing Gloria on All in the Family as the fastidious Florence, while Rita Moreno, the Oscar-winning West Side Story actress, took on the role of the slovenly Olive. Moreno would later be replaced by Brenda Vaccaro during the show's run. Simon made various updates to modernize the material for the mid-'80s, changing the weekly poker game to a Trivial Pursuit game night, and replacing the Pigeon Sisters with two male flight attendants named the Costazuela brothers. Critics were mixed on the production, with some feeling that simply changing the genders of the characters wasn't enough to make the material feel fresh, and that Florence and Olive sometimes felt like Felix and Oscar in drag rather than fully realized female characters. Nevertheless, the show ran for nearly 300 performances, demonstrating that audiences were still hungry for variations on Simon's classic comedy about mismatched roommates driving each other crazy. Fact 8. Al Molinaro's Happy Days. Conflict. When producers began casting the new Odd Couple in 1982, they faced an unexpected obstacle regarding one of the original show's most beloved supporting characters. Al Molinaro had played Murray the cop in the original Odd Couple series from 1970 to 1975, and his character was one of the regular poker-playing friends who frequented Oscar's apartment. Molinaro had become closely associated with the role, bringing a lovable, dim-witted, but good-hearted quality to Murray that made him a fan favorite. The producers of the new Odd Couple naturally wanted to bring back as many familiar elements from the original series as possible, and having Molinaro reprise his role would have provided a direct connection to the beloved original. However, there was a significant problem. Molinaro was completely unavailable because he was already committed to another sitcom. In 1982, he was appearing as Al Del Vecchio on Joni Loves Chachi, a spin-off of the massively successful series Happy Days. Joni Loves Chachi followed the characters of Joni Cunningham and Chachi Arcola as they moved to Chicago to pursue music careers, and Molinaro's Al Del Vecchio character had been transplanted from Milwaukee to Chicago to run a new restaurant in that city. Even though Joni Loves Chachi would itself be canceled after just one season, Molinaro was contractually obligated to that show during the exact period when The New Odd Couple was in production. This forced the producers to recast the role of Murray with a different actor. They ultimately chose John Schuck, a tall, imposing character actor who brought a completely different energy to the role, making Murray feel like an entirely new character rather than a continuation of Molinaro's beloved portrayal. Fact 9. Only white main cast members. The New Odd Couple made a deliberate choice to recast the two main characters of Felix and Oscar with African-American actors Ron Glass and Demond Wilson, fundamentally changing the racial dynamics of the show compared to the original series. However, not every character underwent this racial recasting, creating an interesting and somewhat unusual ensemble for early 1980s television. The producers decided to keep two of the supporting characters white, maintaining them as Caucasian even as the show's leads, and most of the regular cast became predominantly black. John Schuck played Murray the cop, one of Oscar's poker-playing buddies who frequently visited the apartment, and Bart Braverman portrayed Roy, another member of the regular poker game crew. These were the only two white actors who appeared as main or recurring characters throughout the series' run, creating a racially integrated cast that was still relatively uncommon on network television at that time. The decision to keep Murray and Roy as white characters rather than recasting them with black actors was likely made to maintain some connection to the original series, since both characters had been white in the Tony Randall and Jack Klugman version. This approach created an interesting dynamic where the show wasn't simply an all-black version of The Odd Couple, but rather a racially mixed ensemble reflecting a more integrated vision of friendship groups. Other recurring characters in the show, including the Pigeon Sisters, renamed Mona and Cecily and played by Jo Marie Payton, Sheila Anderson, and Ronalda Douglas, were cast with black actresses, further establishing that the show's primary perspective was centered on African American characters and culture while still including white supporting players in the mix. Fact 10. Future Family Matters Reunion. The New Odd Couple may have been a short-lived failure in 1982 and 1983, but it inadvertently served as the place where two actresses first worked together who would later become part of one of television's most successful family sitcoms. Jo Marie Payton appeared on The New Odd Couple as Mona, one of the updated versions of the Pigeon Sisters, the two British women who lived in the same building as Felix and Oscar in the original series. In this version, the Pigeon Sisters were reimagined as African American women, and Payton brought warmth and humor to her recurring role. Meanwhile, Thelma Hopkins, who had previously been part of the singing group, Tony Orlando and Dawn played Frances Unger, Felix's ex-wife. Hopkins appeared in 2 episodes of The New Odd Couple, and interestingly, the character kept the same name Frances that Felix's wife had in Neil Simon's original stage play, though the original TV series had changed it to Gloria. 7 years after The New Odd Couple was canceled, both Payton and Hopkins would reunite on a show that would become a cultural phenomenon. Family Matters premiered on ABC in 1989 as a spin-off of Perfect Strangers, and it starred Jo Marie Payton as Harriet Winslow, the matriarch of the Winslow family. Thelma Hopkins joined the cast as Rachel Crawford, Harriet's sister, who moved in with the family after her husband passed away. The chemistry between Payton and Hopkins that had begun on The New Odd Couple clearly translated well to Family Matters, where they played sisters navigating life's challenges together. Family Matters would run for 9 seasons, becoming one of the most beloved sitcoms of the 1990s and launching the career of Jaleel White as the iconic character Steve Urkel. Fact 11. Felix led theater instead of opera. One of the few genuine character updates that the new Odd Couple made to distinguish itself from the original series involved Felix's artistic pursuits and cultural interests. In the original Odd Couple that starred Tony Randall and Jack Klugman from 1970 to 1975, Felix Unger was portrayed as a passionate opera enthusiast who not only attended opera performances regularly, but actually led an opera company. This detail became a running element of the show, with Felix's highbrow cultural interests often clashing with Oscar's more working-class, sports-oriented lifestyle. The contrast between Felix's refined love of opera and Oscar's preference for watching baseball games and hanging out at the track was a key source of comedy throughout the original series. When Ron Glass stepped into the role of Felix for the new Odd Couple, the producers decided to make a subtle but meaningful change to this character trait. Instead of leading an opera company, Glass's version of Felix was portrayed as the director of a theater group. This shift from opera to theater represented one of the rare instances where the remake attempted to adapt the character for a new context rather than simply copying what had come before. The change suggested a slightly different cultural background and set of interests for this version of Felix, positioning him as someone involved in the performing arts, but perhaps with a more accessible, less elite form of cultural expression than opera. However, this was one of the very few character modifications that the show made, and most other aspects of Felix and Oscar's personalities, quirks, and conflicts remained virtually identical to the original series, making this theater group detail stand out as a rare moment of creative independence. Fact 12. Uptempo theme song. Makeover music played a crucial role in establishing the identity of the new Odd Couple, and the show's creative team made a deliberate choice to update one of the most recognizable elements from the original series, the iconic theme song. Neil Hefti had composed the original theme music for The Odd Couple back in 1970, creating a jazzy, moderately paced instrumental piece that perfectly captured the show's New York City setting and the sophisticated yet playful tone of the series. That original theme had become so memorable that it was instantly associated with the property, appearing not just in the TV show, but also in various other adaptations. When the new Odd Couple launched in 1982, producers knew they wanted to keep Hefti's composition since it was such an integral part of the show's identity, but they also felt the need to modernize it for 1980s audiences. The solution was to keep the same basic melody and structure, but completely rearrange it with what was described as an updated urban arrangement that gave the theme song a much faster, more uptempo feel. The new version had a funkier, more contemporary sound that reflected the musical styles popular in the early 1980s, with a rhythm section and instrumentation that gave it a livelier, more energetic vibe compared to the laid-back jazz feel of the original. Some viewers appreciated this modernized take on the familiar tune, finding it catchy and appropriate for the show's new context. However, others felt that speeding up the tempo and adding the more urban-influenced arrangement altered the character of the music too much, making it feel less sophisticated and losing some of the original's charm. Fact 13. Canceled. After only 18 episodes. The new Odd Couple faced an uphill battle from the moment it premiered in October of 1982, and despite the star power of Ron Glass and DeMond Wilson, the show never managed to attract a substantial audience. ABC had hoped that the combination of a beloved property and two popular sitcom actors would create a hit, but viewers simply weren't interested in what felt like a rehash of material they'd already seen. The show aired on Friday nights, competing against established programming on other networks, and ratings were consistently disappointing throughout its brief run. As the season progressed and ABC executives watched the numbers fail to improve, the decision was made to cancel the series. The final episode of The New Odd Couple aired on May 26, 1983, bringing the show's total run to just 18 episodes, less than a full network season, which typically consisted of at least 22 episodes. This abbreviated run meant that The New Odd Couple never got the chance to truly develop its own identity or find its footing with audiences. 18 episodes is barely enough time for a sitcom to establish its rhythms, develop its supporting characters, or build a loyal following. The show premiered in the fall and was gone by late spring, spending less than 8 months on the air. In the years since its cancellation, The New Odd Couple has occasionally appeared in reruns on cable networks like BET and TV Land, usually airing alongside episodes of the original series, but it remains largely forgotten by modern audiences. The show never received a DVD or streaming release, making it one of the more obscure entries in the Odd Couple franchise and a cautionary tale about the challenges of remaking beloved television classics. Fact 14. Ron Glass later became Firefly's shepherd. Ron Glass's career as Felix Unger on The New Odd Couple may have ended in disappointment in 1983, but the actor would go on to achieve lasting fame and cult status through another television role nearly 20 years later. After The New Odd Couple was canceled, Glass continued working steadily in television, appearing in various guest roles and series throughout the 1980s and 90s. However, it was in 2002 that Glass landed the role that would define the latter part of his career and introduce him to an entirely new generation of fans. He was cast as Shepard Daryl Book in Firefly, the science fiction western series created by Joss Whedon for the Fox network. Firefly followed the crew of a spaceship called Serenity as they navigated life on the fringes of civilized space, taking odd jobs and trying to stay one step ahead of authorities. Glass's character, Shepard Book, was a preacher who joined the crew as a passenger but became a spiritual guide and moral compass for the morally ambiguous characters surrounding him. The role showcased Glass's ability to bring warmth, wisdom, and mystery to a character, as Shepard Book's past remained shrouded in secrets that hinted at a much darker history before he found religion. Although Firefly was canceled after just one season, it developed an intensely devoted fan base that successfully campaigned for a feature film continuation. Glass reprised his role in Serenity, the 2005 film that concluded some of the storylines from the series. Sadly, Ron Glass passed away on November 25, 2016, at the age of 71 due to respiratory failure. His death was mourned by fans of both Barney Miller and Firefly, who remembered him as a talented actor who brought intelligence, dignity, and gentle humor to every role he played. Fact 15. DeMond Wilson became an ordained minister. When The New Odd Couple ended in 1983, DeMond Wilson found himself at a crossroads in both his career and his personal life. The show's failure marked the second consecutive sitcom cancellation for Wilson, following his short-lived series, Baby I'm Back, in 1978. As acting opportunities began to dry up and Wilson's career momentum stalled, he was also struggling with serious personal problems that were threatening to destroy his life. In his memoir, Wilson later revealed that during this period in the early 1980s, he was earning $40,000 but spending much of it on cocaine, and he was engaging in extramarital affairs that put his marriage in jeopardy. Wilson had been raised Catholic and had even served as an altar boy in his youth, and his grandmother was Pentecostal, giving him a strong religious foundation. At age 13, after nearly dying from a ruptured appendix, Wilson had made a vow that if he survived, he would dedicate himself to serving God in some ministerial capacity when he became an adult. In 1982, as his life spiraled downward, Wilson rediscovered his faith and began to turn his life around. By 1984, just 1 year after The New Odd Couple was canceled, Wilson became an ordained minister, fulfilling the childhood vow he had made decades earlier. He founded DeMond Wilson Ministries, which was headquartered in Laguna Hills, California, and began preaching throughout the United States. In 1995, Wilson expanded his ministry work by establishing the Restoration House of America, a center located near Lynchburg, Virginia, that provides spiritual guidance, mentoring, and vocational training to help former prison inmates successfully reintegrate into society. Wilson has stated in interviews that he loves preaching more than anything else he's ever done, including his acting career.